So, how has being a father changed you since, were you a father before you left the military, or is it since you've come away from it?
I was a father at a very, very young age. So I was 19 when I had my first child, and I've had four. Just always grew up knowing that I wanted kids. So I think part of my religious background, I was in a culture where that's what you did, and I loved it. That's what I wanted to do, and I loved being a father ever since. How it changes you, for me, I think also being young and my dad having not been able to be completely involved in my life because he got ill when I was younger, what it did is it actually had me look at my role in life. It was like it became a life or death situation. So becoming a father it didn't up the stakes of the game, it upped my awareness of the stakes. And that's actually one of those times where I'm like, okay, I've got to perform. I'm only 19 years old. I just joined the Navy. Like, this is going to be a very difficult task if I don't learn to dial this stuff in. So that's how being a father changed. It had me become aware of the high stakes game that I was in.
And you've got daughters and sons?
3 daughters, 1 son.
So how have you found it different coming from, sort of the macho environment of the SEALs to working with daughters? Do you find those people who say girls play with dolls, boys play with games? I mean, I disagree with that. How do you look at raising boys against raising girls?
Well, I've had people watch me like teach a child to swim in my pool, and I've heard it more than one time where somebody would comment like, "Wow, you're kind and patient." Like, I wouldn't think that from a SEAL. I can't believe how soft you were. You know what I mean? Like how nurturing you were through the process. And I remember, like, it was curious to me. I'm like, well, how else would you be? And I just realized, again, our cultural definition of masculinity. You see football coaches, just idiots out there yelling at kids, have no idea anything about human performance, and they think it's disgusting to watch because it's so ineffective. And the fallout that they're producing, they don't see it on the field, but those kids are going to experience for the rest of their life. And my point being like this: boys and girls are zero difference in how you train them if you understand training at a fundamental level. So you have what I like to call the next truth. If you hold your fingers up like a little bit of a distance together and think, okay, if these were 2 PowerPoints and I got them close enough, a spark would form. I call that the next truth. And some people need a little bit more of a firm hand at the moment. Some people need a very light hand at the moment. Some people need to be loved and encouraged and hugged. Some people don't. And boys and girls, depending on where they're at, they're going to need some variety of all those things all the way through. Training and raising kids is the ultimate definition of not being right about being effective. So I always say you have to watch the human and how they respond to what you're doing and adjust accordingly. So if I'm looking patient and kind, that's because the situation and the person in the moment required it. I've literally been on the rocks with waves crashing on the rocks, my 10-year-old daughter getting scared. I'm talking to her about the definition of courage. I'm working her through the formula for producing courage at the moment. She's making progress. And then she's cried and I smacked her butt. Now, people would be like, they're going to call Child Protective Services, but it's our relationship and everything like that. It wasn't a mean thing. It was like a whack, hey, heads up. And she's like, oh, shoot, okay. It snaps her out of it. And so she needed that at the moment. Sometimes she needs me to be like, no, do this right now. Quit arguing with me. But most of the time, that's not what she needs. But I can do that because I put in the work. I've been patient and kind. She loves learning from me. And sometimes she'll be like, okay, I needed that. Just drop it. Drop the hammer on me. Tell me what I need. So boys and girls are no different. And here's why it's really, really important to get this right, too. So it used to be that, culturally speaking, men competed or were the hunters, and women, culturally speaking, held the kind of gatherer and nurturing role. And biologically speaking, we're still both designed ideally for those 2 different roles for the most part. But that's not how our culture works anymore. Women now have to compete on the same playing field as men. So you do girls a disservice if you raise them differently. So that used to work. Those are old operating systems of manhood. Those are all old operating systems of parenting. I'm the first generation of parents who've raised kids with the 0 internet experiences when they were born, and then they transitioned into it. Then I have a second set of kids, quote unquote, my younger 2. They were born straight into it. A very, very very, very different world than what we all grew up in. So it's a different outcome. So you can't raise those little girls differently, because you're going to cap them at the knees when they try to compete with men later.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've always been very, very against that mentality of girls should be taught differently to boys. You know, everybody should be raised the same, given the same skills and the same kind of training. And it's like you were mentioning earlier, it's about learning the person. You know, it's leading from the front, showing them how to do. And it's like you were teaching your daughter not to deal with emotion, but to fall back on the experience and on the training. You know, you just sometimes need to be snapped back into that mentality. I don't know how it would have worked if you'd slapped a seal on the bum, but it would be slightly different.
Same thing, you smack them in the head. Or, you know, and again, it's not a mean-hearted physical abuse kind of thing. It's like a clap or a, hey, wake up. And you said it perfectly. Her psychology had her gripped. She was gripped in a psychology of fear and me just doing something out of the ordinary. And she didn't expect it. She looked back at me like she turned around. She's like, I'm about to choke you out, because she does jujitsu too. But she shook it off. She's like, oh, okay, I'm back. Like, yeah, okay, you're awake. It's kind of like in the movies when they used to slap people when they get hysterical. It's the same idea. And you can do it all kinds of ways. You could go, hey, you could yell, you could clap, you can make a joke. But, you know, the situation and terrain dictates is what we'd say.
So what's your opinion on women in the military? You know, if your daughters came to you and said, I wanted to join the military, as a father, would you be against that? Or do you think the military offers a lot of good things for a kid to go into? And, you know, how could somebody whose kid is joining the military, how can they prep them to succeed in that military life?
It's kid dependent again. Like, I really, really needed it. I had a lot of freedom when I was young from my dad getting sick, and I didn't handle it poorly, but I was going to handle it poorly. Like, I could see, like, okay, should I continue? My ability to handle this freedom is going to get not so good for me. So some people need it. I think with my kids, if I have a preference, I would say I put my thinking, and I'm not pragmatic about this. I'm not designing them to be in or out of the military. But I think what I want to do is I want to set them up so that they don't need to be in the military. Like, I needed to be there. They might choose to be there, but I'm working to set them up where they don't need to be there, meaning they could go and do other things and become successful, live happy and healthy without that discipline, without that rigor, without that launching point. But that might not work. They might need it anyways. You know what I mean? They just might need that thing anyways. So that's how I organize. So I'm trying to shoot past the military, but that doesn't mean that they won't want to be there. And then there's some patriotism to it where people choose to do it for other reasons. So I don't encourage it, nor do I discourage it.